Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Poddin My Noggin. Now, I'm going to apologize to my guest right off the cuff because typically before I hit record, I confirm how to pronounce their name. And so I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm hoping that I'm going to say it correctly, but maybe you'll just correct me. Lane, and I feel like the I is silent, so I'm going to say Igoudin.
Igoudin. Yeah, it's pretty close. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So, Lane, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
I'm glad to be here, CK.
Everybody at home, Lane is the author of A Family Maybe. And it is a book that was released, I believe, actually, if I'm not wrong, late 2024?
Yeah, last year.
Yes. And it chronicles the story of you and your partner and the foster to adopt system and how you grew a family. So we want to talk about this book today because what I've read so far, and I did say to you that I wasn't able to get through the whole book because of whirlwind life, but I will finish reading. Let's go back. So there's this gorgeous picture of you and John in 1997, looking all fabulous and wonderful and comfortable. How did you guys meet? San Francisco, I believe it was.
Very good question, and that's actually not in the book. That was one chapter I took out, and I regret taking out of the book. Yeah, the picture from 1997, that was 28 years ago. So John and I have been together for 28 years, and when people see that picture, I just love it when they ask me, "Is that you, Lane?"
Yeah,
it's me. Yes, it's us.
I think you look identical to that picture, except it's a little more refined.
Yeah. Well, it's not in the book, but I'll tell you anyway. It was a very romantic beginning for us. I think, the way we met and the way we started our relationship. I met John the same day I actually met the Clinton family. I was working in Stanford News Service, and that was the day that Bill and Hillary were dropping off their daughter on our campus. And so it was a very eventful day, and I was working for probably like 16 or 17 hours straight, like from 4 a.m. until God knows when. So I got home to San Francisco, and my suitcases were packed because I was leaving the next morning to fly to Greece to go to a conference, to present at a conference, a research conference. So I'm like, well, it's midnight. I'm going out. I'm still like so wired from the whole day. So I just went out, and I met Jonathan. I met him at a bar, and we had a pleasant conversation. And all I got out of it was a business card. So he hands me over the business card, and I said, well, how about I'll send you a postcard from every country that I go, because I'm going to Greece and then to Turkey and then to Israel. So I can send you a card from each of these countries, and we can sort of reconnect after I come back. So he loved the idea. So I did send him cards from each of the countries. And then when I came back, I called him. I called the number on the business card, and I asked him, "Did you get my cards?" And he said, yes, I did. Thank you. And I said, well, how about we go out? And before I could even finish the sentence, he said, yes. So I'm like, all right. So I guess he was looking forward to that as much as I did. So we went out to dinner. That was our first real date. I think it was the next day. And I was jet lagging like crazy. It was like 11-hour difference. And so we went out to this Moroccan restaurant, and low cushions, belly dancers, like I just kept falling asleep. Like, he'll never want to go out with me again, but he did. So that's how we met. And when we met, we didn't really talk about the kids at first. I always knew I wanted to be a dad. I knew that since I was, I don't know, I guess even before I was a teenager, I knew that. I helped to raise my younger sister, and I always saw myself in the future as a dad. I mean, I knew I was gay, and I kind of saw myself as a single gay dad with two kids. But I ended up being a married gay dad with two kids. But that was always sort of written in the stars for me. Um, and so when we met, the more we got to know each other, the more we kind of started exploring that. And as you'll read in the book, John wasn't exactly on board, but then he came around, and we we went into the process together.
So, for those at home, and I would encourage everyone to go get the book. But so, I mean, talk about the fact that it was 1997. I mean, I know as a gay man what I was doing in 1997, and wasn't necessarily like it was. People knew gay people existed, all of that sort of thing, but it still wasn't very like broadly accepted, if you will, in that time. Were you out, the both of you, in 1997?
I was out, and I was out to my parents. I was out. I was out of work, but I was also living in a very liberal environment. We're talking about Stanford University. We're talking about San Francisco. And so it was a bit of a bubble. I get it, but I would like to maybe read a little bit from one of the chapters in the book,
Of course.
exactly about what you're asking, which is the chapter that's called "Pathways to Parenthood." So I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but just kind of to give you an idea. So I'll just start. So my earliest knowledge about gay parenting comes from a once very popular magazine called Newsweek. Those of us who lived through the 90s remember Newsweek. So back in 1996, working a student job in Stanford News Service, I picked up a glossy issue from a stack of magazines that came in. Intrigued by the cover blurb, "Gay families come out." Those were different times for gay people in America. While the decades of criminal persecution had largely ended, full equality was still years away. Just 2 months before the article, President Clinton signed into law the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, prohibiting federal recognition of same-sex unions. But the Newsweek's five-page feature, complete with a star interview, Melissa Etheridge and her partner, and a normalizing the kids all right narrative of a daughter of a gay mom, gave the readers the true lay of the land. In 1996, only 13 states allowed lesbian women and gay men to adopt. California, my home state, along with Ohio and some New England states, was colored the highly tolerant green on the map accompanying the article. Even then, the writers noted, usually only one partner is the parent of record, leaving the other in legal limbo. Courts allowed adoptions by a second parent in some of those states, although the law is still in flux. End of quote. Characterize the state of being a gay parent. In some states, one could still lose a child, even one's biological child, because of being a homosexual. To protect their children and families, many gay parents had to stay in the closet. But some began to confront their kids' schools and other public institutions to demand acceptance. The Newsweek article sparked hope in me. There was a way for a gay man to have children, and likely I was living in a green state. So then this was 96. We met in 97, but we were just getting to know each other, weren't ready. So it wasn't until we both moved to Los Angeles, to where we live now. We live in Greater Los Angeles, that we really started to explore the options available to us. And at that time, and there were already the same options as those that were available to us, that are available to us today. And that would be international adoption, private adoption, surrogacy, and foster adoption. So those were the options.
So tell us about the foster to adopt. Sorry, that was my pup. I'll just give her a little screen time.
Oh, cute. Look at that.
She's wearing a shirt that says Cat Son. Tell us about, I mean, I guess if we were to speak to a cisgender heterosexual couple about foster to adopt program, their views might be very different, like on what that's like. But tell us
Mm.
about that sort of setup. How does that actually work?
How does it work? Okay. And you're in Canada, though, right? So it might be a little
I
bit different.
am, yes.
Yeah, it might be a little bit different. Quebec, I believe, right? Where you are. In the United
I can adopt as a homosexual up to
Right.
the age of 45,
Oh,
single.
interestingly, in in the United States, anything related to family marriage is the state prerogative. So we don't have
Okay.
federal laws governing adoption or actually marriage, to be or that kind of thing. That's a state prerogative. But we don't really have any age limits, strictly speaking. We have very dear friends who have adopted 4 kids from foster care, and the fourth one they adopted, one of the husbands was 60 at that time, and that was a few years back. So we don't have that. But as I was describing, back in the 1990s, back in the 1990s, I would say the foster systems just began to open themselves up to gay individuals and couples. And it wasn't done because the states were very like pro-gay and all for gay rights. It was because there's just way too many kids that didn't have a home, and there weren't enough homes to put them in. And so it was very much under the radar. I would say prior to year 2000, if you knew someone who is gay and who was raising a child, most likely that child came from a previous marriage. I know it came from a heterosexual relationship. So when we went into the process in the early 2000s, we were pretty much at the part of the very first generation of out, LGBT, or you can just say at that time the gay families. And so in some states we could do that. In many states we couldn't. But what happened was that our building a family coincided and overlapped and was very much part of being involved with a struggle for equal rights. Um, and as the struggle sort of intensified and some states began to buck against it, right, passing more and more, no same-sex union laws and things like that, the more that the gay rights issue was in the news, the more the gay families were coming out of the underground and into the public spotlight. So
Yeah.
to us, it was really, there was really no separation between raising our kids and being out in public and going, pushing the strollers down, the street to the gay parade, petitioning, our officials, testifying here, giving the money there. It was all one struggle, it was one campaign. So things might have changed since we do have same-sex marriage in all states now since 2016, if I remember correctly. And foster adoption is legal in all 50 states. But back then it was having trying to build a family as a gay man or as a gay couple was very much a political statement.
So you apply.
Right.
I don't know much, right? So you apply to be a foster parent.
So first you get certified. First, and the rules for gay men were no different from the rules for any other applicant. For a single woman or a married couple, a straight married couple, it didn't really matter. So the way the system is set up is that if you want to adopt from the foster system, you have to be certified as a foster parent first, and the earlier in the process you want to come in, the higher is the risk that you might lose the child because the child may go back to a birth, relative. However, there are a lot more children. If you're only open to the children whose parental rights have been terminated and who are available for adoption, that's a much smaller pool of kids, and usually older and very often larger sibling sets. And just knowing, that it was just the two of us, we didn't have any extended family helping us. It was just John and me and John. We had to work with what we had. We're both, gainfully employed, and we had a home, and there's just so much space and so much time and so much, honestly, knowledge about how to raise a child that we had that we could really deal with. So we went through trying to decide exactly what it is that we're looking for, and we settled on having basically 2 kids, 2 girls, or a girl and a boy. I had more experience. Like I said, I raised my younger sisters, and I kind of felt that it would be in some ways easier for us, maybe emotionally too. We kind of felt we could relate better. And
Yep.
fast forward 20 years later, oh yes, our children, our daughters are now adult women. And so, yeah, I think in that sense, I think we've been pretty much on the same wavelength in many ways. So,
Well, I think
yeah.
what's really cool about the story too is that you got her name just went from my mind.
Gabby and Mariana and Gabby, Mariana and Gabriella.
Mariana was the first one.
Yes, the older one.
And you got her when she was just under a year, if I'm not wrong.
Just about, yeah. She just turned 1 year old when we met her, and she was already in foster care. She was already in foster care.
So so when you do the fostering thing, this is where I'm curious too. Do you find out like what the story is for other people?
It really depends.
Or...
It really depends. Like it's case to case. We knew what Mariana's story was, and it's sad that the first year of her life was so traumatic before she came to us. We were not her first home. We were her third home. And we knew that she has a mother, that the mother, and you'll see why, for very clear reasons, could not raise her. And there was no other birth family to speak of. And so it was clear that even though she was detained by the court and put, under the court's protective custody while the court was trying to decide what to do with her, there would be very little chance that she'll be going back to her mother, so she'll be free for adoption soon. What we didn't know, that at about the same time as we met her and we took her in and we became now officially her foster parents, so that with the intention to adopt, that her birth mother will reappear, try to claim her, and she'll come back pregnant. That's why we have 2 daughters, not 1, and they're sisters. And so when all this happened, now we were talking about 2 cases. And in the case of her younger daughter, there was also the birth father, who was also present in the picture, with some additional litigation between him and the mother. And you will see why. So criminal court and all that stuff, getting involved. So things went from, we'll just go in and, it'll be, kind of an easy ride to signing adoption papers like with our friends, to a never-ending uphill battle trying to do what's best for the children and trying to keep our family together.
Well, I know from
our kids from being separated, which was
there's that as well. And you, if I'm not wrong, you got. I apologize. My mind is just drained at the moment. You got the second one when they were a newborn.
Right, and that's the very. Let me read the first chapter of my book, because that brings you straight into the heart of where we are at that moment.
Okay.
So the chapter is called Curbside Delivery, and it's about a very unusual delivery which we were expecting on, and I kid you not, on 6/6/6, on June 6, 2006. Okay, it was on a hot early summer afternoon, just before the breezes would begin blowing inland from the ocean, that Jonathan shot me an irritated sideways glance. Where is she? Didn't she say early in the morning? That was hours ago. What's taking her so long? A 6'3" athlete with the face of the Bridgerton lead, my partner Jonathan was lining up daisy-patterned onesies and burp cloths by the bassinet in the baby room. I heard him vacuum this room earlier, and before that, tidying up the crib and the toys in the baby room upstairs. Patience, dear, I sighed. Just give her a few more minutes. She should be on her way. Like John, I was trying to control my anxiety by being useful. Yet, I couldn't help rushing to the window every time I heard a car drive by. Jackie Willis, our designated LA County social worker, was neither here nor responding to my calls. Did the county change its mind? Did they release the baby to her mother, Jana? We'd been living with this uncertainty for months. Jana was due around Memorial Day, but with office closures and Jackie out on medical leave, the baby could have gone to the wrong home. But that Memorial Day, I received a phone call from Babushka, my Russian-speaking grandmother. Mazel tov, she announced. Your Jana gave birth today. Well, how on earth do you know that? We've heard nothing from the county, I scoffed at her. I just know, she said in her raspy, confident voice. Так что не волнуйся, сам увидишь. So don't worry, you'll see for yourself. Okay, I relayed her announcement to John, and he chuckled at my dear 84-year-old grandma, our closest ally in the family. And I chuckled too. But deep down, I felt even more anxious. What if she was right? I had no experience raising a newborn, nor did John. Zero. We'd been trained and certified, but that was all just textbook learning. Were we really about to become caretakers of a tiny, fragile life, 100%, 24/7? What were we getting ourselves into? 3 days later, a social worker called from the hospital with the news that the baby had been born on Memorial Day, just as Babushka had said. But she couldn't be released. She had sepsis, a potentially fatal blood infection, and had to be put on medication. Other arrangements had already been made by Jackie's Department of Children and Family Services. The newborn would not be released to her mother. Instead, she would be detained, that is, put in the court's protective custody, and placed with us as an emergency foster home. The baby would remain with us as her long-term foster parents, while Jana would be given an opportunity and resources to reunify with her child. Sepsis made it easier for the county to carry out its plan. Jana recovered quickly and was discharged home to continue, as we were told, with her drug rehab and counseling. Meanwhile, the baby was improving on antibiotics, while the court, on the county request, formally detained her. But Jana came back to breastfeed, and the nurse leaked the secret. Devastated and desperate, Jana refused to leave, pleading with the staff to let her take her baby home. Should I continue?
So much already, right? That's it's for anybody who's going to read it, and I hope that you all do. You had the first one, right?
That's right. So what's happening here is the social worker arrives. John brings her in, takes her out of the car, and I take her over, and I sit down. I'm giving her her first feeding, right? And John leaves. He picks up the keys and goes to the daycare, and comes back with her sister. Her sister, who is 20 months old, and she's already been living with us for 8 months. So I leave the reader with a situation where we just got a newborn, literally a newborn, straight from the hospital. But we also have a pre-toddler who is her sister. And as things will become very clear in the chapters to come, legally things are about to go into an overdrive. And with all kinds of claims being made to the children, and all kinds of agendas, and this situation is just beginning. So yeah.
Well, and it's chaotic for the children, but also
not for the children, for us. The children didn't know. The children only knew one set of parents, which is us. So for the children, people ask us, do you celebrate your daughter's adoption days? I'm like, no, because to us as a family, it was no different that some judge 20 miles away who will never ever meet the children makes the decision to terminate their parental rights or not. It's like to our kids, we are the only parents they have ever known. Right?
Yeah.
They are the only.
Gabby,
our the baby that I just described, would grow up on John's chest for the first probably 3 or 4 months of her life, because he would carry her everywhere as he was doing everything, answering his emails, unloading the dishwasher, whatever he would do. She was always here. That's the only parent she would ever know. So with that in mind, we prevailed with them. Things turned out very well at the end for us, but there was no. It's this whole conflict between what I call the legal and the human is one of the major dilemmas in this book. Is basically how can you be both foster and adoptive? How can you just take the child to take care of them and not fall in love with them, especially these babies, and intend to adopt them and make them your own? And how can that depend on the decision of the court? It's not a court decision. It's a human decision. It's a decision made in the heart. So And this will continue to drive the whole story.
We're
Because
going to talk more about it.
from the moment we saw these children, from the moment the older one moved, we saw her and she moved in. From the moment the newborn came to our house, we weren't foster parents. We were adoptive parents. That was the reality.
You had already decided.
Yeah, because we didn't go into the system to foster. We went to the system to give these children a permanent home, a forever family, and so everything we had, in terms of our time, energy, our money was spent on them because we were family.
Love this. We'll talk more
maybe
in
not.
a few minutes.
That's the title.
Yes. We'll be right back, everybody.
Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody, to Poddin My Noggin. Before the break, we have been talking to Lane Igoudin. I think it's good. Author of the book of Family Maybe, Two Dads, Two Babies, and the Court Cases That Brought Us Together. So before the break, we were just talking about Lane was gracious enough to read from his first chapter of the book, talking about how they had received their first daughter, and then a short period after, approximately 8 months, they received her sister, who was a newborn baby, and that you went into foster to adopt, not
Correct.
just to foster. You went in to build a family.
Correct.
Now, the court cases, the trials, all of the struggles, that lasted 3 years.
Yes.
Yes. That's a long time. And in the book, you talk about the father of the youngest one, the complications that caused. I think everybody knows that in the end, all worked out. But what was the defining moment when you and John could say, it's done? And this is it. We are a family. There's no other claims being made. Like, what was that moment for you?
In the foster adoptive process, the most crucial, I would say, step towards adoption is the termination of reunification services. Because when, again, I'm going by the laws in the United States, which might be different in other countries, but in the United States we have the federal law, which passed, I think, in 1996 or 97, which basically says very clearly that if the child is taken into the system, there should be a kind of a two-track approach as to what to do with the child. Number one is try to return the child to the family and provide, and basically the judge will issue a court order specifying exactly what the biological parents or extended family need to do in order for them to reclaim the child. So, and of course, we all want that to happen. I'm not in any way disputing that biological children should be torn away from their families. No. In the situation where it's possible for them to go home, they should and they must go home. But the second track is what's called the concurrent track, and the law says from the get-go there should be a clear path for what to do with a child if the child is unable to return home. And the thing is, when you raise, especially a small child, a week in the life of an infant is like a month. Okay, a month is like a year. They grow up so fast, they develop attachments. They all these things happen very fast. Basically, the longer you prolong this kind of this kind of like in between situation that and later on you interrupt it, the harder it is on the child, the more traumatizing it is, to the child. And so what happened in our situation, that's like, people ask me, so what do you suggest? How would you change the system? I'm like, well, it's not really about the changing the system, but it's really about sticking to what's in the laws. Because as you'll see from my book, we were never treated as a valid second option. We were treated as an unwanted, lesser than, unsupported, disrespected, set of people who were, in the meantime, actually being the 24/7 parents to these kids month after month, year after year. And so the anger at this being completely disempowered and being treated that way is probably what drove me to document our story, so that whatever would happen at the end, because it was never clear what was going to happen in the end, I would be able to share it and tell other people, this is what it looks like when you go into the system trying to do something good, and when things go wrong. So that was one of the reasons I decided to write this book, because there was nothing written about it quite this way. There are foster care narratives, nonfiction books, memoirs, novels. Probably the most famous one is White Oleander by Janet Fitch, who endorsed my book, as you can see on the cover.
Yes.
And so we know about those, but what is it about from the adoptive parent perspective? What is it like to deal with a system which is so chaotic, so unpredictable, and so inhuman? So that's what really brought me to it. Mm-hmm.
And it's, I think it's sad as well. You and John were othered in the system, and all you wanted to do was to have a family and love.
Yes.
And all of the naysayers and the people who treated you so poorly during that period of time, well, you showed them, right? Like, you have two beautiful young women who you've raised as a giant middle finger to that broken system and how poorly they treat.
Well, I don't want to say giant middle finger. That's. I would say it's more like, I think we've been able to prove to whoever doubted that, yes, an adoptive parent can successfully raise two kids, and yes, a gay couple can successfully raise two daughters. I mean, if but it's not easy, and it was a very difficult experience, but it was a life-defining experience for both Jonathan and me. He participated in some of the interviews, and he always says that this is probably the most important thing he's done in his life. Is to give a home to two kids who did not have a home. And just to put it in perspective, back in 2004, 2005, when the book begins, Los Angeles County had the largest foster system in the country, and still does. It still does. LA has a larger foster system than New York. So at that time, there were over 30,000 kids in Los Angeles County alone who were in foster system, who did not have a permanent home, and which was about a quarter of all the kids in California, foster kids, and a big chunk of a half a million kids in the United States that year that did not have a home. And despite all these legislation and money thrown at it, today in the United States, there are 368,000 kids in foster care. I mean, for Canada, which is quite a bit smaller, 368,000 kids, too many, as I say, too many. And part of it is because the system hasn't changed. In essence, it hasn't really changed. In some ways, it even got worse, I would say, but it really hasn't changed.
There's a lot of barriers to adoption.
Yeah,
I find, and you hear about them all of the time. And I mean, I'm going to be cynical and just put it out there that I think the whole foster situation's big business, right? I think that there's corruption. This is my belief system. I don't know if you would agree with any of that, but
I would not agree, because I would say that it's a kind of a mishmash of ideologies. Many of them are very liberal ideologies that went into it. I mean, I live in probably one of the most liberal states in the country. Our entire legislation is Democratic, and I vote Democrat. But it's also, so there are multiple agendas at play here. Most of them are very positive, that are in conflict, I think. And also, originally my book was actually quite a bit longer. what I took out of it primarily was the research and the commentary and all that, because I realized, I don't want this to be a social studies book. I'm not an expert. I'm not a professor. I mean, I am a professor, but of linguistics. Okay, I teach English and linguistics. I do not teach, child welfare or social studies. So I took it all out. But there's one I was kind of curious about like, maybe exactly because I'm a queer person and I queer the system which was not designed by us and for us, right? We were and we still are a tiny, tiny, tiny minority in the system which overwhelmingly serves, children of straight people and is, sort of straight families primarily. So I was curious about how did it get set up. And so what I found was that the very first adoption statute law in the United States was passed in the most liberal state we have, which is Massachusetts, in the mid 19th century. And the state was trying to figure out what to do with all these children who were out in the streets, did not have family, and were going straight into the underworld, as many of them still do. So basically, what the state did is they assumed, and this assumption continues to this day in pretty much every state law on adoption in every state, that children are treated the same way, treated as property of their parents. We're talking about 1850s. Should I remind you who else was treated as property at that time in the 1850s?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's in the South, but both the North and the South and the West. Remember who else was property? The wives.
Yeah.
So basically, the wives, the children, in the South also other human beings, are all property that belongs to, well, that time was a husband. But this idea that you and the terms to this day, the term to make a decision in a children's case is to dispose of a child. It's a disposition case. I mean, it's a disposition hearing. So to detain property, to dispose of the property, and it's to me it doesn't really come from really looking at the best interest of the child. From what I've seen in our personal experience, comes second to reunifying the owner with their property, that is the parents with the children. That overrides most other concerns.
So it's not person-centric.
No. It's the children's interests are not centric. And I would also tell you that I've been interviewed on quite a few not quite a few, on some conservative shows. And I would say this is one of the places where I think like there's a lot of concern of child welfare from both sides of the spectrum. And I'm glad that I got to get our story out there to the audience, which probably would not otherwise read me or listen to me, because I think this is one of the quite a few places where we can actually begin to connect and talk and discuss what to do moving forward, because it's just not working. Just not working.
I think children should have the right to a safe, healthy, and happy home.
Right.
And I think that it doesn't matter where you come from, maybe what your beliefs are per se. It's who you are as a person and what you can provide them. So whether you're gay or you're straight or you're trans or you're conservative or liberal, religious or atheist, if you can provide that being, that little child, a safe home, that's where the sight should be always. Is, are you equipped to provide that? Does the child need this? Let's facilitate this happening. Sure, okay, yes, the reunification, maybe a parent messed up and they need some time, but there are people who only want to foster because they have their nuclear families, and then there are families who want to foster to adopt.
And there are also parents who messed up, as you said, and cannot improve.
Of course.
And are unable to parent. And so that's a very unpleasant reality that in some ways our case shows and many others. Yeah, because the thing is, there's this idea that, the system is some sort of a cabal that is trying to take your children away. The state does not want your children. It's burdened with tens of thousands of children in our state alone, right? And I can speak for California. They do not want more child to go into the system and stretch its resources even further. If they have to remove the child, there's usually some reason. And many of the children go back, once the reason has been resolved, but many children cannot go back. Cannot go back exactly because the situation cannot, for whatever reason, cannot be resolved. So what do you do for them? How much time are you going to process them? How long until you quote dispose of them in whichever way it's going to be? And I think there's another misconception, and about the system. Yeah. So I think, it's bad social workers, bad judges. No, even though I was very angry because everybody, at some of the people in our story, everybody brings in their personal biases and prejudices and agendas. It's all there. It's all very clear. Okay. Grant you that I don't think there was any particular adult in the situation who really wanted to hurt the children, even though in the end, the children were being hurt. But I don't think anybody really was intending to hurt the children. No, there was never anybody's intent. I think everybody meant well, but because of different agendas, because of different situations, because of not even knowing the children, because of being stretched, in the end, the children were being hurt. And I'm very, very critical of the judge in the case that we lived through, but even with when it comes to judges, I looked up some statistics. In California, a children's court judge is supposed to have about 160 cases to work on. In real life, they have up to 600 cases they have to process. You walk into the children's courtroom and there are stacks on every table, stacks of files, and it became very, everything we've gone through and all the court hearings, and everything we've gone through. When we came to the adoption hearing for Mariana, for our older daughter, and the judge looked at us and said, "Oh, she recognizes," waved to us, and then she took the case, took seconds, said, "Okay, so great. So today we're going to. It's a very happy occasion. Today we will be basically granting the adoption rights to the child, Elizabeth." I was like, "What Elizabeth?" That's Mariana. She said, "Oh, it's not Elizabeth, Mariana." She couldn't remember the name. She said, "Is that Jenna's daughter?" And it just hit me like after 3 years, it was still not about Mariana, whom the judge never met, but it was still about her mother, whom the judge did meet in the courtroom. Yeah. And so I was like, wow, here we are at the end of the process, at least for our older daughter. And the judge still doesn't know her as a human being. And, I can't really blame her when she got, hundreds of cases to
600 cases.
So yeah, it's a little bit more complex. I don't think there's any evil intent. If anything, I think there is no intent. There's no intent. It's just processing the masses, processing the cases. When you receive a folder and the folder gets something written by other people, you review it and make a decision. But there's a human being behind this. And only we and the birth parents are the ones who will ever actually meet that human being.
Mm. You're making my wheels turn, which I love when guests do that, right? So I'm processing information in real time. So
if anything, in sharing my experience, what I want the reader understand is that I wouldn't want anyone to make very sort of simplistic, have a very sort of simplified idea as to how the system is. It's not. It's much more complex. But also it is this way because there's so many agendas coming in. There's so many people changing during the process too. I documented in one of my books as we arrive at a very important court hearing, which will have a major bearing what's going to happen to one of the children. And I walk up to the children's attorney, who, by the way, never met the kids, but was sort of advocating on their behalf. And I want to talk to her about something. She says, "I'm no longer in your case." I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Oh no, I had too many cases. I had to, how did she put it? I forget the exact wording. I had to basically lighten my load or cut some of my load." Well, part of cutting some of her load was one of our children. So there's a brand new person who knows nothing about the case, who was just handed over the file, and she's walking into the courtroom into a very, very important court hearing. So things like that. It's chaotic. It's chaotic, but there's a lot at stake.
I like how you said that you don't think there's any intent.
I don't think so.
Do you know what I mean? And that's a powerful statement, really, if you stop and you think on what that truly means, almost like it's a machine and there's motions that are going through, and the situation with your lawyer, lightening their load, and then I find it's
But can
it's a
you?
little bit.
It was It was absolutely terrible what happened at that moment. But at the same time, can you really blame her if she has an unmanageable, caseload, and she wants to, kind of scale it back a little bit and move some of the cases to someone else? Right?
Yeah, so it really does point to the fact that the system is just not well built.
No.
And clearly, from what you had indicated earlier about like the legislation that was passed in Massachusetts, it it's not as a point of the system being broken. It's a point of the system never being adequately established
Right.
because they're
Not
not
thought
properly.
through and not sort of amended to fit the needs.
What do
Yeah.
you think a large overall of the adoption system would look like? That's a big question.
Well,
So you don't.
being an immigrant myself, as you can probably tell by my accent, because we were a refugee family from the former Soviet Union. I am a little bit familiar with systems in other countries. I believe that a panel of judges would be much more effective. Who I mean, if I could introduce a system like that would, together with with experts for children's welfare, would decide what's best for the child before they decide what's best for the parents. I think that would be ideal. Um, I think providing a whole lot more funding
Mm,
would help, probably ease some of the loads. But also, a lot of it is culturally based. I think over the last few decades, there's been sort of a shifting of responsibility for taking care of the children from the families onto the social systems. For example, the school. The school is expected to provide now X, Y, and Z, which wasn't there before. The state is expected to provide things, and so maybe, in an ideal world, I think some of the responsibility needs to really shift back to the parents.
well, I think
But it's not the society we're living in, isn't it?
it's not, but I think that that's really important, right? So if we look at, you said, I think 368,000, was that the correct
Exactly.
number?
Today in America, yeah.
Today in America, there's 368,000 kids in the foster system.
Yes.
So if we stop for a moment and take this from a psychological standpoint, and we go to our sort of the core value process, why are so many children ending up there? And what can, say, the state, the schools, media, the government do to help maybe provide better education to parents, better resources to parents, to help them when they're struggling, when they have needs that aren't being met? Like, so there's a way, I think, if it was to be overall altogether, that we could do like a 360 approach where we're helping the families, the nuclear families, but also helping the ones that are ending up in foster care appropriately.
And you're
You,
saying all this, CK, and I hear a Canadian.
you
Canadian
hear what?
speaking. I hear a Canadian speaking here. Governments. We have a very different culture on the other side of the border.
I know, and I know, but I feel like, I mean, Canada's not perfect by any means, and I know
No,
there's this
no,
like,
no, no, no. But it's not just, in many ways the government reflects the culture. It's more that way than the culture reflects the government. I think the government reflects the culture. Um, so I'm not sure where I would go with this. But can I give you a queer perspective though? I am a
yes,
queer writer and a queer parent,
okay,
and as such, being a queer and an immigrant, we went, I'm looking at the system a little bit from the outside, or a lot from the outside. Um, the decision for a gay man to have a child, when he is single or married, as I am, is a conscious decision. The child in the gay family is conceived in the mind because we cannot biologically reproduce, just naturally. So it's never an oops. It's always planned.
Yes.
But it's not the same in many straight families. And of course, millions and billions of straight people plan to have children, but sometimes children happen just because they happen. And it's not a conscious decision. It's, there isn't much preparation or there aren't that many ways to support, especially when the parent needs to build themselves up to be able to live independently, as what we were, faced with, in our case. And so I don't know what kind of a public affairs campaign it would take to get that message across, that you really need to plant and to want and plan to have a child before you have it. That would probably be the most effective way to reduce the number of kids in the foster system.
Yes, I agree.
We planned it. We planned
elsewhere
it.
Then you were saying that though.
And I know a lot of people plan. My sister and her husband decided not to have children. That was a very planned decision. I didn't particularly like that decision, but it was their decision, and I respect it. But there was a decision made. There. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a to go even beyond what you just said. I think that there's a sort of a clear indication in that message as well. If you have a gay man or a gay couple showing up wanting to adopt a child, it is a conscious decision. They're ready to show up and prepare and provide for that child.
And I wouldn't say just gay couple. I think any other adoptive couple or adoptive individual, gay, straight, LGBTQIA, whatever, it takes. I think my conclusion after living through, living through our journey, 20 years of it, is that it takes a responsible adult to raise a child. It has to be an adult, and it has to be someone who is functioning, responsible, and willing to do it, and so it could be a grandparent, it could be a cousin, it could be an adoptive parent, and most of the time it's the birth parent. So, but it takes, if the responsible part is missing, then this child is not going to be in a good situation. If the responsible functioning part is missing, no matter how much you love your child, it might not be a very good place for the child to be.
You have to be willing to sacrifice for your child, whether they're your birth child or your adopted child. To be a parent, there is an element of sacrifice that is required.
At the heart of our story is not the conflict between the birth parents and us. There was never a direct conflict. We were on the receiving end of their battle with their own limitations, and in part also their battle with the court to prove that they were able to overcome, their issues. But it was never between us and them. It was never between us. It was between them and them.
Very interesting. And so now your daughters are 20 and 19?
Exactly. Actually, the younger one just turned 19 last week. So born on Memorial Day. We just had Memorial Day last week, right? Or it was last week, wasn't it? Yeah, it was last week, last Thursday. No, her birthday was last Thursday. Memorial Day was last week. In any case, yeah. So they're 19 and 20. We and John and I are empty nesting. Our older daughter lives independently. We're supporting her, but she's living independently. We're helping her around with her rent and insurance and things like that. But she is working. She's working at a theme park, and she's very, very happy there. She graduated high school, and so right now she is working at a theme park. Our younger daughter is finishing her freshman year at a university, so she's living on campus. And we're actually driving this weekend to pick her up, because it's the end of the spring quarter, and so she'll be back for a little while. So yeah, they're doing very well, but we're still very much a close-knit family. So, for example, for her birthday, she just came home, and we all got together. We had a wonderful brunch. So we FaceTime, we talk, we text, and yeah, we see each other, one another pretty often. So that's, we're still very, very close. But I would also say that now that they're young women, we have to learn to parent adult children. So like it's always a learning curve. and they're always ahead of you, by the way. You catch up to them. They're changing, and as a result, we have to change. So that's what I've been learning and kind of writing about too. I've been writing quite a bit about parenting, and I think my latest article was about empty nesting from a more of a spiritual
Yes, and
perspective.
for people at home, you have been published all over the place. Lots of publications. You have a PhD in what was that?
I do have a doctorate, but it's not in creative writing. I teach English and linguistics.
Yes.
That's what I do. But I've been writing for decades. I never planned to write this book.
So
This
was
was a
this
book
a
that was never
lesson
planned to happen, but it happened. So
of
yeah.
journaling?
Yeah. So doing when we went into the process, and I was journaling, as you said, I was keeping a diary, and the crazier the things got, the more I realized I really need to document this, because this there's nothing about it. Like when you really go into the system and things go wrong. So I saved boxes of faxes and court orders and brochures and everything else that went in, and also hundreds of emails. And so I thought, okay, once we reach the end, I will write about it. And we got to the end, and I couldn't write about it because I was just too burnt by the whole process that the last thing I wanted to do was sort of reopen all this all over again. So it took me about 4 years until I was actually able to face it. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what's in it. Let's see if I can, I can string a narrative out of what happened in a way that would be interesting to the reader. And so I started, and then it took me another, I would say, 7-8 years to finish the draft. Yeah.
And then we get a family, maybe.
Yeah.
2 dads, 2 babies, and the court cases that brought us together. So you can get this book anywhere online.
Correct.
In stores.
And you're in Canada. You actually, you got it off of Amazon Canada.
Oh yes, what's interesting is we get pretty much every book that's released in the US up here, right? Yeah. So we're able to access lots of great American content. And then, so you're taking a short time off from doing interviews and that sort of thing. Do you have more books in the future that you think you might write? Or
I do. There's another memoir long project that I want to write about, and that would be in the near future. And then that has something to do with my grown up gay in what was then the Soviet Union, and there's a love story at the heart of it, or sort of, or maybe. Which spans several continents. So I really want to write about that. But also I've been publishing quite a bit on mindfulness and spiritual growth and how they intersect with parenting. So if any of your listeners are interested, I encourage them to look up my website, which is laneigoudin.com, and look up my monthly newsletter called Blessing the Sea, and it's a free monthly newsletter where I explore all these different issues. Yep. And my book, like you said, it was published by a traditional publisher, which is part of Portland State University. And so the book is available in an Amazon bookshop, but also in some bookstores, primarily independent bookstores. They also carry it as well. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to link the websites in the description for everybody so they can easily access. You can go check out the book on Amazon in Canada or the US.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that I love the most, to be honest with you, about your story is that and it's very inspirational to me, and I'm sure it is to a lot of people, that you were 2 gay men, you met, you fell in love, you had a dream of starting a family, you, against all odds, found your family, and now here you are 20 years later with this beautiful book, and of how you did that successfully. Like, that is inspirational to a lot of people, because I think a lot of people just in the queer community don't believe that they could have that for themselves, right? And you did that.
Well, I would say that it starts with, if you are a couple, um, it starts with you and your partner. I mean, I would say
Mhm.
the backbone of the family is your relationship with your partner. And
Of
so
course.
what I learned is that is not to take them for granted. You know, you should always keep an eye on them, you know, and love them and give them more and support them. And because it's, you know, what we went through was pretty difficult, right? But we made it through, you know, by working together like two hands, but also by taking care of each other. I think that's the primary thing. So the idea is that you know you you're building a family, and at the end of the process, you should all still be together, right? So
Yes.
that's what it's about. It's not just about the children; it's about the family overall, right? So how do you
Yes. The whole
keep it
family
together?
unit.
By starting with your partner and yourself in that relationship. That was my experience.
Words of wisdom from Lane Igoudin, everyone. Lane, thank you very much for being on the show and talking about your book with
Thank you,
me.
CK. Thank you.
I hope you have continued success. I look forward to seeing what comes out next from you. And for everybody at home, make sure you get out there and buy a copy of A Family Maybe and check out Lane's website. You'll find it in the description. And until next time, get out there and live your wildest dreams.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.